was my 8th grade field trip, and we were visiting the Greenwood Zoological Reserve. I remember it was a gray Wednesday in early spring overcast skies, the air still wet from the morning rain. My friends and I, Olivia Marquez, and myself were grouped with Mr. Henderson, one of the quieter teachers. He mostly let us roam within the scheduled areas as long as we checked in every half hour. Perfect for a field trip where you'd rather be inside. We were a group of about 30 students, shuffled into small clusters with assigned chaperones. The zoo wasn't huge. Some buildings had ivy crawling up their stone walls. "You three from Mrs. Honley's class?" he asked. The reptile house smelled like mildew, and something else like the walls had absorbed decades of humid breath and wet leaves. The exhibits were normal enough. Tigers pacing, lemurs watching us from high perches, penguins clustered like gossiping tourists. "You interested?" It was outside the aviary that we first met him. A man in a dark green jumpsuit stood beside a service gate, his badge read. Zachary, volunteer coordinator, used to house. He had this calm smile, like he'd been waiting for someone to talk to. The hallway was dimly lit by a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Certain animals were kept here, temporarily, ones they couldn't quite classify. The air smelled like wet fur and rust. We nodded, even though we weren't. "Great," he said. "I'm running a quick behind-the-scenes tour. Nothing fancy, just a sneak peek at a restricted exhibit. No signage. Just a rusted metal door with faded yellow caution stripes." He unlocked it and waved us inside. He looked at the three of us and said, "Some exhibits?" At the center was a large glass tank, cracked in places, with nothing inside but straw, old bones, and a deep black hole in the far corner that seemed to slope downward, never really close. Marcus was already stepping forward. Olivia looked hesitant, but I'll admit I was curious. He looked official. I asked how long it had been shut down. The trees closed in more back there, casting shadows that felt darker than they should have been for early afternoon. The gravel under our shoes felt damp and spongy. Had the name tagged, keys, even a clipboard? And his walkie-talkie occasionally crackled with voices. He just nodded, distracted by some commotion with another group. And the old carnivore wing. It's been sealed off since 2004. There's no power there. We told Mr. Henderson we were joining a guided tour. Zachary led us through the service gate and down a narrow path behind the aviary. Eventually, we reached a small, concrete structure, half covered in vines. "It's not open to the public yet," he said. Inside, it was cold. The kind of cold that feels like it's coming from the ground itself. The first thing we did was tell a zoo staff member what had happened. She looked at us carefully and asked, "Are you sure?" He said his name was Zachary. Told her his name, his face, even described the building. She blinked and said, "There's no restricted exhibit, and we don't have any volunteers by that name." Zachary guided us through the dark corridor, explaining things in that same soft, even tone. "This used to be the carnivore overflow wing." Olivia muttered, "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. We passed a few empty enclosures, glass walls smudged and cracked. Tags scratched out, something thick and black dried in one corner of a cell. Zachary finally stopped walking. Then he opened a final door and led us into a larger chamber. It was dark only. A red emergency light illuminated the room. "Something used to live here," Zachary whispered, pressing a hand against the glass. "Still might." None of us said anything. I heard Marcus mutter, "Hell no," under his breath. Then Zachary turned to us. "Do any of you ever hear it at night? Like breathing from inside your closet?" That's when Olivia bolted. We chased after her, back through the halls, past the empty cells, through that cold corridor until we burst into daylight again. When we returned to the main zoo path, out of breath and shaken, we insisted. The zoo director eventually came over. We nodded. No building. Her voice dropped. We had a volunteer by that name. Years ago. He went missing during a late-night cleaning round. They never found him. She pulled up a map on her tablet and showed us. There was nothing behind the aviary. No access trail. But we remembered it. Every detail. Later, when I looked at the group photo we took earlier, that did just... Before meeting Zakiri, I saw something that made me freeze. Standing just behind the fence, half hidden in the shadows, was a figure in a green jumpsuit. He wasn't smiling this time, just watching, and I swear to this day, but he would like more. His eyes were pitch black. It was a Sunday morning. You know, just a regular day here in the house. The creature never seemed to mean us harm, but rather appeared lost and tormented. Each time it drifted away, it carried with it the sound of that gut-wrenching screech. We were prisoners in our own home, unable to find solace in our sanctuary. Sleep became a luxury. Meals were eaten in silence with every clink of silverware, sending us into a frenzy of glances toward the door and windows. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of damp wood, and something else, something indescribably ancient and unsettling. The entries spoke of frantic searches, whispered rumors, and a growing sense of dread. As days turned into weeks without a trace of the missing child, the final entry detailed a chilling discovery. A gaunt and emaciated figure found in the woods near our home. Never identified, but bearing a striking resemblance to young Samuel. The diary slipped from my grasp as the attic door burst open. The box in its hand pulsed with a strange energy, and I knew instinctively that it held the key to our torment, both past and present. I turned to the creature, but it was gone. In its place stood a woman, her form shimmering like moonlight on water. Her eyes, filled with gratitude and sorrow, met mine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing with centuries of longing. "You have brought him home." As abruptly as she had appeared, she faded away, leaving behind the lingering scent of lavender and the echo of her gentle voice. With newfound determination, I stepped forward, eager to unravel the mystery that had haunted our home for so long. Where moments before there had been boxers piled high, now stood a rocking chair, empty but for the faint imprint of a small child. Overwhelmed with emotion, I sank into a nearby chair, feeling the weight of the attic's sorrow lift like a fog. The sun streamed through the newly cleaned windows, painting the attic floor with golden light. I rose, my legs shaky, and stumbled down the stairs. The creature let out a mournful cry, seeming to sense the imminent resolution of its sorrowful tale. In that moment, I understood that our journey had led us not just to the discovery of a lost child, but to the opportunity to bring him home. With trembling hands, I carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a small silver locket. Adorned with delicate etchings, it looked as if it had been passed down through generations. I reached out to touch it, and as my fingers brushed against the locket, the attic filled with a blinding white light. The creature stood before us, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. In its outstretched hand, it clutched a small, intricately carved wooden box. I couldn't help but reach out. As our fingers brushed against the box, images flashed through my mind. A mother cradling a baby, a picnic in the woods, a chilling discovery. I picked it up, its silver surface cool in my palm, and I felt a surge of peace, knowing that Samuel was finally home. The haunting was over. The whispers had ceased. The creature had vanished. But the spirit of a lost child had found peace, and in the quiet of our home, we could hear the faint, joyful laughter of children at play. The diary had hinted at. The source of the whispers lay in wait in the dim oil lamplight. Among boxers filled with forgotten memories, we discovered an old trunk. Its surface was adorned with faded paint and peeling varnish, and it emanated a palpable aura of sadness. As I lifted the heavy lid, the musty smell of aged paper and fabric wafted out, carrying with it the echoes of the past. Inside, nestled among yellowed letters and brittle photographs, we found a diary bound in worn leather. Its pages contained the flowing script of a bygone era, chronicling the tale of a mother's desperate search for her lost child. Laughter, once abundant in our house, died in our throats. It was as if the mere joy of being alive offended the creature. We were doing our regular things, like playing games, drinking coffee, laughing at Tim, and failing miserably at being a functional family unit. The creature's image flickered at the attic window, its mournful eyes staring directly at us. Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed the attic door shut, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for the light switch, but it wouldn't turn on. We were trapped in the attic with the ghosts of the past. But soon they grew more distinct, weaving tales of sorrow and despair. The creature's appearances became more frequent, its wails more anguished. The whispers filled every corner of our home, weaving a tapestry of despair that threatened to consume us. The joy of our lives together seeped away, leaving behind an echoing emptiness. Our home, once a haven of love and laughter, transformed into a prison of fear and sorrow. I started hearing fragments of conversations about a lost child in a desperate search. Then whole sentences floated through the house. "I can't find my baby. Please help me find my baby." It was heartbreaking to witness such anguish, to feel the weight of another's grief echoing through your own home. It was as if the creature wasn't just visiting us, but reaching out to us across the veil of the living and the dead. Large black eyes stared at us blankly, and its mouth hung agape in a silent scream. For a split second, it seemed frozen in place, and in that instant, we could see the horror etched on its face. The whispers reached a fever pitch, coalescing into a single, heart-wrenching plea. Find him. As if guided by an unseen force, we found ourselves drawn to the attic door. It stood slightly ajar, revealing a darkness that seemed to beckon. Fear warred with an overwhelming sense of purpose in my chest. We exchanged a look with my wife. In that unspoken moment, we shared a determination to uncover the mystery that haunted us. Then, with a screech that tore at our sanity, it vanished outside. All we saw was a swirling mass of fallen leaves. We quickly peeked out the door and looked around. I should mention that the wind was really picking up at this point, with rain beginning to fall. It was a typical autumn storm brewing, the kind that sometimes hits Vermont in September. But the image of that creature remained burned into our minds. The kids are getting ready to go out, so they're putting their shoes on and grabbing their jackets. Well, suddenly, a huge gust of wind blows through the door. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Autumn is windy here in Vermont, and it's also cold. And since our door is often propped open, random gusts like that happen pretty regularly. But this time, it was different. In that brief moment before the door swung shut, we got a glimpse of the most ghastly creature we've ever seen. It stood in our doorway, gaunt and tall. Its head was oddly shaped, like an elongated skull. We tried to brush it off as a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. 3 kids, a mortgage, and a dog can wear a person down. But the memory persisted, and the sightings continued. Every time the wind whipped around our home, the creature would appear briefly in our doorway. Sometimes it shuffled past us, dragging itself closer and closer with each gust. Other times, it pressed its ghastly face against the glass pane in our front door, letting out mournful wails that chilled us to the bone. Occasionally, it would vanish only to reappear in other windows around the house, always silent, always mournful. It was terrifying and disturbing, yet there was something undeniably sad about it. And then came the whispers. They began subtly, like the rustling of leaves outside our window. As days turned into weeks, the intensity of the haunting grew. One night, the wind reached a crescendo. Rain lashed against our windows, and the creature appeared at our front door, more solid and more sorrowful than ever before. We ascended the attic stairs, each step echoing our pounding hearts. With trembling hands, we read about a young boy named Samuel, who had wandered away during a family picnic near our very house. As we pored over the diary, the whispers in the house grew louder, forming a chorus of sorrow. Then, as if responding to our discovery, the whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, urgent demand. Show me. As the realization dawned on me, the creature let out a deafening screech, shaking the very foundations of the house. The diary fell from my numb fingers, landing open at the final entry. In the sudden stillness, I noticed a change in the attic. As I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed the locket lying on the table. There was no reason for my name to echo from the darkness behind that door, no reason at all. I was the only one in the basement, or at least I was supposed to be. I was in 8th grade when our class took a field trip to the Hawthorne Historical Museum. Not out of rebellion or boredom, but curiosity. There was something off about the museum. The halls felt too quiet, like they were holding their breath. I didn't say anything to my friends, or the teacher. I just slipped away when everyone's attention was on the antique weapons exhibit. No placard, no paint, just plain dark wood with a brass knob and a rusty keyhole. It didn't match the others I'd passed. It looked older, like it didn't belong to the building at all. You know, the kind taxidermy, oil portraits that follow you with their eyes, and the heavy scent of old wood and mildew hanging in the air like a warning. But then I heard it. We were about halfway through the tour when I broke away from the group. The stairwell to the basement was roped off, but the rope wasn't tight. There was no tour signage, just a maze of narrow hallways and old crates pushed against the walls. I told myself, maybe it was under renovation. One quick glance behind me, and I ducked under. The air grew colder as I descended. The lights down there flickered, some dim, some completely out. Then I saw it, a small wooden door at the end of the hallway. The voice had come from inside the room behind that curtain of darkness. The hallway behind me seemed darker now, like the shadows were leaning in. I pulled back, and the floor creaked loudly beneath me. I reached for the handle. I didn't say anything, how could I? Hey, sorry I missed the 18th century embroidery exhibit. I was too busy hearing my name whispered from a black hole. 3 soft taps, perfectly spaced. I live on the 2nd floor. It turned with a heavy click. The room inside was pitch black, not Damasterisk black. My phone's flashlight barely cut into it. I should have closed the door and left. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. Ethan, my name. A child's voice, soft and drawn out like they were exhaling it. My body froze. Ethan. Over the next few days, it happened again. not always at night. Once, it was in the school hallway, behind me. Once, in the shower, just a breath in the steam. But I knew it. I recognized the tone. The way it said my name, like it already owned it. It said it again, a little louder, a little closer. Not sound exactly, more like pressure, crawling across my skin and chest, like the name was being pushed into me. That time, I felt it. I stepped back. It showed a group of children in front of the Hawthorne Museum. She had found something slipped into our mail slot, no return address. Inside the unmarked envelope was an old photo, black and white, creased and dusty. Their clothes were early 1900s, and they were all looking at the camera, except one boy. He was turned, mid-step, walking away, toward what looked like a small wooden door in the background. I forced myself to close the door. It shut with a sound like stone grinding. And then, the whispering stopped. I sprinted back up the stairs. By the time I caught up with the group, my teacher barely noticed I'd been gone. I just lay there, breathing shallow, hoping it would stop. And then I heard it again. But that night, things got worse. I woke up around 3:00 a.m. to the sound of tapping on my window. I didn't look. Ethan. It was the same voice. But now it was behind me, inside my room. I snapped around and turned on the lights. Nothing. The room was empty. I barely slept that night. Then came the worst part. A week later, my mom called me into the living room. Scrawled on the back and faded penciled were the words. Asterisk. Asterisk, he answered. Now he belongs. Asterisk. Asterisk. Always that voice. I never went back to that museum, but I dream about it sometimes. Always the basement. Always that door. And always calling my name. Don't go to the 3rd floor. I only opened that door for maybe 5 seconds. But in those 5 seconds, I saw enough to make me quit my job, torch my uniform, and never set foot in that part of town again. I used to do overnight security, work empty warehouses, shuttered factories, places no one was supposed to be. Easy pay, mostly boring. You just walk the perimeter a few times, jot notes in a logbook, try not to fall asleep in your car. That's how I ended up watching over Madison Ridge Academy, a private school that had been closed for over 20 years. They told me it had been shut down due to water damage and funding issues, but it looked more like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Desks still in rows, chalk still on boards, old textbooks collecting mold on sagging shelves, like someone just turned off the lights and locked the doors one afternoon. The security company's instructions were simple. Walk the exterior once every 2 hours. Make sure the motion sensors inside stayed green. And this part stuck out, asterisk. Do not enter the building. Under no circumstances go to the 3rd floor. Not pristine, but like someone had wiped away the grime. There was even a handprint. Small, like a child's. At the time, I figured it was just a liability thing. Then a sharper sound. The metallic clang of a locker door slamming shut. That school hadn't seen a student in 2 decades. Maybe unstable flooring. Asbestos. Something you don't want some temp guard stumbling into and filing a lawsuit over. But rules have a funny way of tempting you when you're restuck in your car all night with nothing to do. I'd used my override key to get in through the front doors, just planning to take a quick look around the 1st floor. Maybe prove to myself it was all in my head. Around my 3rd shift, I noticed that one of the upstairs windows stopped left. 3rd floor looked cleaner than the rest. It started small. The air was even colder, and the hallway was darker, like the emergency lights had been swallowed up by the walls. When I got to the third floor landing, I paused. Not until I saw the door at the very end of the hall. Everything felt wrong up there. The doors were mostly shut, but a few were cracked open. I didn't dare look inside. It was different, painted a pale blue, with no number on it. My flashlight beams swept across the room and landed on a circle of old desks. And sitting at every one of them ... were dolls. Just a tarnished brass knob and a tiny sign above that red asterisk music room. But when I circled back to the front, that window was fogged over again. It smelled like wet concrete and old paper, and my footsteps echoed way too loud down the halls. The motion sensors never went off, but that didn't make me feel better. That night, I walked the perimeter slower. Flashlight out, eyes flicking to every shadow. Nothing unusual. I stared at that window for a long time, like someone had been breathing on it. Others had tiny braids, little name tags. It looked just like a girl ID seen in a newspaper clipping in the front office earlier that night. Her name tag, red asterisk, Lindsay P. The next night, I heard a noise. It was faint at first, something like floorboards creaking in an empty room. I radioed it in, pretending I thought it might be a raccoon or trespassers. But deep down, I knew better. On my fifth night, curiosity finally got the better of me. It was 3:14 a.m. I remember the time, exactly because the clock above the front office desk was the only thing still working inside. But I do remember the sound I heard as I reached the bottom floor. The air was cold. Inside, much colder than it should have been in early fall. I told myself I'd just check the stairwell. Just look. That was it. I called the company, said I'd had a family emergency, and told them they needed to send someone else. I climbed the first set of stairs, then the second, and something else, something faintly sweet, like Ducade perfume. Still, I walked in. The third floor was lined with classrooms. I reached for the knob. It turned. The door creaked open. I smelled wax. Dozens of them. Small, pale, plastic-faced dolls, each one dressed in what looked like a school uniform. Some had missing eyes, and every single one of them was facing the door. Facing me. I froze. My light caught a large chalkboard behind them. Someone had written across it, in perfect cursive, asterisk, 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 asterisk. And then I swear to God, one of the dolls turned its head. My foot hit something soft. I looked down and saw a doll. I hadn't noticed this one sitting directly behind me. Legs sprawled out, arms open like it had been waiting. When I turned around again, the door to the music room was shut. I hadn't closed it. The hallway lights flickered, then cut out entirely. I bolted. I don't remember running down the stairs. I don't remember unlocking the front doors. A low, soft voice whispering, asterisk. You weren't on the list. I never went back. Didn't finish the week. Didn't collect the check. A month later, I checked the building again from across the street. That third floor window, it's clean now. And there's a tiny, child-sized shape standing behind it, holding a name tag in its hand. It says, asterisk, asterisk,